First Person Advisors is now a subsidiary of NFP, the fifth largest insurance broker in the world, combining local expertise with access to global capabilities and solutions. Learn more at firstpersonadvisors.com.
When I was 14, I followed a family member to a TV station and had one of those lightning strike moments. That day, it's as if my professional future came together in a single instant of clarity. When I walked into that newsroom, goosebumps. There was no turning back.
Anne Ryder's gut guided her even back then, when she was a teenager walking the halls of Broad Ripple High School in Indianapolis. A career in television news was calling her name.
This is the News Channel 13 News Update.
I'm Anne Ryder. Tonight, after the movie, President Clinton's life has been threatened for the second time in a month by yet another Hoosier. We'll have that story.
Tom Cochran and Anne Ryder, the prime team for news in Indiana.
Landing a high-profile anchor gig in your hometown, well, that's a dream come true for most journalists, and no different for Anne. But her heart and soul were always in the trenches, boots on the ground, bringing home some of the biggest news stories in Indiana.
What ensued, as you said, was a 6-hour hostage ordeal that took one life, has injured 4 people. This plane went down in a cornfield near Roselawn. Here, workers see their company outsourcing for cheaper transmission parts.
What I appreciated about her is that she didn't just operate in the small world that we live in. She didn't just operate by trying to look at what big stories can I do, but how can I mesh the two of them.
The journalist crafts the art of telling the stories that affect our lives in ways that are relevant, truthful, and compelling. Sometimes that means disturbing the comfortable and comforting the disturbed.
A half-mile away, under a bridge by the river, a kid without a job, without money, and without a home is ready to see and be seen.
This is the port of Durrës in central Albania. We're getting in. Here we go.
It is nighttime when the fears and the memories surface for the refugee.
Didn't matter if she was talking with homeless teens living on the fringe in the shadows of Indianapolis, or with refugees across the globe in Albania. Anne delivered their stories with compassion, honesty, and relevance. Her biggest get? Well, that came in 1996 on a trip to Calcutta, where then soon-to-be mother Anne Ryder found herself face-to-face with Mother Teresa.
Just meeting Mother Teresa was a blessing, but at the end of our interview, the blessing went a step further.
I am expecting a child.
Oh, God bless, baby.
Will you say a blessing?
Yes, I will. May I have some blessed medals?
Thank
when
you.
Is the baby coming?
November.
And you pray that
I have prayed.
And you pray that when she grows big, that she becomes a missionary of charity.
Mother Teresa gave us all miraculous medals, kissing and blessing each one.
Anne Ryder, the born and bred Hoosier, Emmy Award-winning journalist, and Indiana Broadcast Hall of Famer. She's my guest this week on the Business and Beyond podcast. Hello and welcome to the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. I'm Gary Dick. Anne Ryder grew up on the north side of Indianapolis. Her dad, a well-known and respected lawyer. She lost her mother when she was 15, an experience that had a profound impact on her life. She graduated from Broad Ripple High School and went on to earn a degree in journalism from the University of Missouri, and got her feet wet in the fast-paced world of local news at WLFI in Lafayette and WTHI in Terre Haute before landing back home at WTHR in Indianapolis, that station where the journalism bug bit her at age 14. For 2 decades, she earned a reputation as one of the most respected anchors and compelling storytellers in the Indianapolis market. She snagged 18 regional Emmy Awards and a spot in the Indiana Broadcast Hall of Fame. Anne stepped away from local news in 2004. She is now sharing her tricks of the trade with the next generation of journalists, serving as a senior lecturer at Indiana University. And I'm pleased to welcome Anne Ryder to the podcast this week. Anne, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm pleased to be with you. Good to see you again.
Yeah, likewise. Well, you know, you've been away from news for a long time. You know, I always ask people who have been in the business and then go bit of a different direction. Do you ever miss it, or did you miss it right after you stepped away?
I didn't right away. I had this feeling of elation that probably had something to do with having more freedom, after working every weekend, every holiday, everything. But, Gary, in a way, I don't feel like I've left, because in teaching at IU now, I teach all of the undergraduate broadcast classes, and I'm sort of de facto news director for their newscast of record. And I've got that bug bit feeling again, especially this semester, because the kids have been doing some investigative reporting. So I get just enough of it.
Yeah.
I don't really miss it.
So you obviously like teaching, right?
I love it. Perfect career for me right now. Yeah. And I didn't know if I'd be any good at it, but, started several years ago, 2014. And I've been teaching at Indiana University ever since, and just picking more classes up as I go. And now I'm senior lecturer and just signed on for another 5-year contract.
Okay, so tell us about the next generation of journalists. Should we feel good about the new crop coming out of our colleges and universities?
Honestly, yes. I like this generation. I think right now we're on the cusp. I can't remember, what you call each generation. The students that I get are juniors and seniors. Most of them are very serious minded. Not all of them know if they want to go into broadcast journalism, which I'm fine with, because I teach them video storytelling. They tend to be a perfectionistic bunch. They tend to be more anxious, just as a way of life, than I think our generation was. So some of it is a little bit of school mom, but I also try to act like as a news director would act. I'm really pleased at the students that I've had who have graduated. They're all over the country now, and many of them did want to go into broadcasting, and I've got several in markets in Texas, and they're in Green Bay, Myrtle Beach, El Paso, really all over the country. And it's fun to travel and see my kids, as I call them.
Yeah. Well, the industry and local news obviously has changed dramatically over the years, from the time when you and I were doing it here in Indianapolis for a number of years. What's your take on the state of local news? I mean, again, it's so different. It's such a bottom line driven business now. I think the effect that the dollars have on the bottom line of news departments is significant. And your take on the state of local news?
Wish I could be more optimistic. I'm not. I don't like a lot of what I see, and I'm pretty transparent in the classroom about that. I think the line between advertising and news is getting thinner and thinner all the time. Part of the problem is that you have about 5 companies that own most of the local newscasts or local news stations around the country. So there's kind of this, it's more homogenized than it used to be, and it's formulaic. And you see that almost all over the country. That said, I keep hoping that there will be a tipping point where kind of the pendulum swings back, because I do think that there's an appetite for real news, investigative news, really well told feature stories, and not as much of the fluff. Local news still holds a really prominent place. A lot of people still turn to local news, as a source of their information. But I'm old school enough to be teaching some of the old school tricks of the trade, and I feel really strongly about it. The other thing, though, is I've already got the first generation of graduates who have moved on to another career, because they, anymore, they've got to go out, they've got to enterprise the story, plan it, shoot it themselves, report it themselves, sometimes shoot their own live shots, feed the social media, and then come up with 2 more story ideas for the next day. And it's insane. And these kids are burned out by the time they're 25. Ridiculous. So I'm trying to teach the kind of skills where they'll have storytelling skills and interviewing skills that can take them into all sorts of career. And then in the meantime, crossing my fingers and hoping that some of the things go back the way they were. There are a few family-owned stations left in the United States. who are doing it the right way, but not many.
Yeah. It's a real challenge.
Yeah.
You spent more than 3 decades in television news, as mentioned, Indiana Broadcast Pioneers Hall of Famer, covered so many of the big stories in Indianapolis and Indiana during your career. And really, you had a unique and I think compelling style that connected with the viewer. And I thought it was interesting. I didn't know this, but I was looking at some of the background, Anne. So you actually got a trademark on your way of telling stories. Tell me about that.
I did. At Channel 13, I started doing stories of hope, faith, and resilience of the spirit called Hope to Tell. And I think Hope to Tell still tracks in focus groups now. It resonated. This came about at a time when, we were seeing a lot of celebrity news. If it bleeds, it leads. The news was changing again. And so Hope to Tell was kind of the ultimate follow-up story. So when there's an accident, when there's a diagnosis, when there's something that changes right away, what happens later? How does life change? That's something that I knew from my own experience losing my mom. So Hope to Tell is what Channel 13 owned. When I left, I still wanted a chance to tell those kinds of stories, but in something that I could use on the outside in my storytelling or my freelancing. So I came up with In an Instant, because life does change in an instant, and got protection for that for telling video stories and making presentations as for speeches. So I used that for a number of years. I used it on Channel 13. That was an In an Instant trademark. And then out of the blue, at a time when I kind of needed it, got a call from ABC, and turns out they had been using In an Instant for a few 2020 specials and also on something they were planning to launch, a TV show called In an Instant. And they did their copyright search and found out some woman in Indianapolis owned it. So we negotiated over Super Bowl weekend. Thankfully, I had a great copyright attorney and came up with a deal. And they sent me a check, and I said, "You can have it." So they own In an Instant. Yeah,
that is great.
I'm a believer in branding, and I tell the kids that as well.
Yeah. What makes in your view, what makes a good storyteller?
You wrap it around the people or the person it most affects. And I think you can do that for any story. There are certainly big picture issue stories, but find that person that is really affected by that issue and go micro first. You micro and then you macro. And I'm a believer in nonlinear storytelling. So it's not all chronological. Sometimes the most effective way to draw a viewer in, especially visually, is to start with B-roll and sequences around this person, and then get those the interview that really makes a difference. Pick out the soundbite that really connects, the kind of thing you can't paraphrase, the kind of thing that shows emotion or opinion. So that's my mantra, at least in the classroom.
Well, you use that style in so many stories of significance, and perhaps no better example than your interview with Mother Teresa in, I think it was 1996. In fact, you're the last journalist, the last interview that Mother Teresa did right before she passed. Tell me about that.
Last one in Calcutta. Yeah, the last one in Calcutta. It was career changing. And it was life changing. She typically said no to mainstream media interviews, and she said no to me when I wrote a letter to her. But she invited us to come to Calcutta. She said to share in our works of love. So I marched that handwritten note up to the general manager, and he told me it was the nicest rejection letter he's read in a long time. And my news director at the time, it was John Butte. And I persevered and said, look, I think this is significant that she's been invited to come. Let's send her. So they sent me halfway around the world with not one, but 2 photographers in case I got the interview, with no more promise of a story than me standing in the streets of Calcutta telling you what they do inside the homes. About midway through the week, they changed their mind. And it was a remarkable experience. I met Mother Teresa midway through the week. not quite sure why they changed their mind, but it's the one time, Gary, I went in and decided, don't be a pushy journalist.
Yeah.
They know what you want. Go, soak it up. So I went and I crossed that line and I worked in one of her homes. They call them homes for the poor and destitute. And I did the work. And it was a really interesting way of kind of going in and finding out, what's this really all about? Because as much as it was about an interview with Mother Teresa, it's really about the spirit of service and helping other people and the magic that happens when you do that. So that's what the story was about. It was a remarkable experience. So midway through the week, we were off and running, and then we shot enough for a documentary.
Yeah. What do you remember about when you first met her? Was there that experience that had to be quite an experience?
It was an experience. I had heard that she had this, for lack of a better word, aura around her. And she did. I kept wondering, even at the time that I'm sitting across from her, is this just because I've been told this? Is this because she's Mother Teresa? But she held a gaze in such a way that I had written down areas I wanted to discuss, just in case I drew a blank. And I couldn't break her gaze. I didn't break her gaze the whole time. So we had a conversation, which is always the best way to have an interview anyway, make it a conversation. But there was something about her and to her that is hard to articulate. And I really think that, you'll find Mother Teresa detractors, plenty of them. But I think at the end of the day, it is about the work. And I think the work has its own kind of magic. And I think she spent enough time in service that's part of what people felt around her.
Yeah. Life-changing for you in a way, that experience?
Absolutely life-changing for me. In fact, that was one of the catalysts to eventually, a few years later, power down. And you mentioned I was pregnant. I was pregnant with my daughter when I went over there. Did not tell the station. Did tell my photographers. I was about 2 months pregnant. She actually put her hand on my stomach at the end of the interview and blessed the baby, said a prayer for the baby. Yeah, which is pretty cool. So Jenny's middle name is Teresa.
Yeah. Speaking of life-changing events, you had a life-changing event with a pregnancy several years later that you lost your child and you almost lost your life.
I did.
Right?
I did.
Tell me about that.
It came very close. My understanding is it's become a study case at Indiana University Hospital because it was a bit unusual. But yes, I had a son who he planted on some scar tissue, and as he grew, where he had planted became less and less stable. So on a Saturday, when my whole support system was up at a Purdue Notre Dame game, including the high-risk doctor, who was my doctor at the time, I began bleeding internally. And when I got to the hospital, they missed the diagnosis. They couldn't figure out what it was. They hooked me up and didn't see the evidence of the tear. So I bled internally for 3 hours. As they tried to decide what to do. And usually, you have the magic hour and that's it. So it was a time of utter and complete surrender. It was a very difficult loss. Baby didn't make it. He was a little more than 5 months at the time. So he was big enough to hold. Life-changing in many ways. But Gary, I had already started powering away a little bit from the anchor chair at that time to spend more time with my daughter. Having lost my mom, I thought, I don't want to miss this. I don't want to miss these years.
Yeah.
So then the other loss happened and life really, really changed big time. Some ways for the better, some ways not for the better, but it was kind of like living my own hope to tell story. You find out what you're made of, find out what your faith is made of, you find out who your friends are, all those kinds of things.
Yeah. I sense that faith is very important to you. What was the role that faith had during that period?
It was huge. It was everything. You hear the word surrender a lot in connection with faith. And certainly that day, that terrible day, there was no choice but to surrender. But I went through a very difficult time afterward. I know what it's like to be clinically depressed because that happened afterward. But I also know what it's like to pull out of that hole. And it was the lessons of Calcutta that did it. When you're ready, when you can, you turn it around and you reach back out to somebody else that you can help. It takes a while to be ready. But once you start doing that, service really, that was the magic word for me. And that was sort of the way out of a really dark period.
Yeah. Anne Ryder knew from a very early age that she wanted to go into local news, into TV news. We will talk about that. We will talk about an aha moment that she had when she knew that would be her career path. That and much more when the Business and Beyond podcast returns.
First Person Advisors is now a subsidiary of National Financial Partners, the fifth largest insurance broker and consultant in the world. Develop your total reward strategies all in one place with the combination of First Person's local expertise and NFP's global resources and integrated solutions. Learn more at firstpersonadvisors.com.
Welcome back to the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. My guest this week is longtime anchor and reporter, a Hall of Fame journalist, Anne Ryder. Anne, you're a native of Indianapolis, as mentioned before. You had the really, I think, great fortune to be able to work in your hometown for many years. Tell me about the younger years. What was growing up in Indianapolis like for Anne Ryder?
It was great. I'm a product of the public schools. I went to School 80, which is they're now condominiums in Broad Ripple. They've been converted. Went to Broad Ripple High School. It was a tumultuous time at Broad Ripple High School. In fact, my father was involved in the peaceful desegregation movement to try to keep things very peaceful here. But the school was going through all kinds of growing pains. And I ended up finishing up in night school. So it wasn't a traditional graduation, that kind of thing. I finished up in night school because I had all but 2 credits that I needed, and took a year and worked at, of all places, Karma Records. Greatest job that you could have at a time like that. I mean, it was absolutely terrific. So I got a little break between high school and college. You mentioned earlier, my mother died. That has a way of changing life for sure in the younger years. So I may have been a more serious person, I think, than some of my friends at the time. And I remember I actually wrote something in my journal at 15, making kind of a blueprint for my life, which if you look back on it is a little weird for 15, but knowing this is what I want to do. I want to go into journalism. I want to go into television broadcasting. I knew that. I just knew it.
Yeah, your mother's passing certainly had a profound impact, and also kind of an aha moment was when you actually were visiting Channel 13, right? You were in the building at Channel 13, and that's when you kind of had that aha moment. Say, this is what I want to do.
I did. If we're lucky, we get maybe 4 or 5 of those in a lifetime. For some people, it's when they meet the person they will marry. But it's kind of one of those moments where the hair stands up on your arms or the back of your neck. It's a lightning strike. And I was interested in broadcast journalism, but it wasn't until I followed my dad to Channel 13, ironically, where he was being interviewed about Pride, the peaceful desegregation group. And I walked into the studio and it was boom. It was like looking into my future. Really an electric moment. And I just knew. So after that, I called up the general managers of all 3 of the stations. They all took the call. I said, give me your top 5 journalism schools. And Missouri was on all of them. Northwestern was on all of them. At the time, Syracuse was. I think University of Richmond, Virginia, which in Richmond was there. So I picked Missouri. Mizzou, and I was off and running. I knew that's what I wanted to do.
Okay, now you started in smaller markets, of course, Lafayette, WLFI, Terre Haute, WTHI. Now, something I didn't know that we have in common is you did weather in your early days, right? So did I in Terre Haute.
You're both in Terre Haute. Go figure. Saying
Yeah.
I did weather was that's generous, Gary. I was horrible, and the only reason they hired me to do weather, I was told later, was I had a bit of a physical resemblance to the meteorologist, very talented, who had left in sort of a huff. And so they said, kind of, hey, kid, can you do weather? And I said, well, can I still do some reporting too? So I was half and half. And about 3 months into it, they said, okay, we believe you can't do weather. So bad news, good news. Bad news is you're fired effective immediately from the weather. Good news is we'll keep you as a reporter. What was your circumstance? I'd love to know. How'd you?
Yeah, and actually, I was actually still in college at Indiana State. Believe it or not, I went down. I was doing radio news, anything I could to get experience, and I interviewed for a part-time reporting position at Channel 2. They said, "Well, I think we're going to go this other direction, but have you ever done weather?" And of course, I said, "Oh, well, but no, but I'm sure I could do it." And they actually put me on the air on weekends for like a year and a half or two. And actually, in hindsight, it was one of the great experiences because, I knew nothing about the weather and, didn't know what I was saying probably half the time. But it gave you the ability or the opportunity to talk for 3 minutes, 4 minutes, whatever it was, live without a prompter. So helped my live reporting skills, I guess.
I'm guessing you were vastly superior at doing the weather. To me, I would draw blanks. It's just the weirdest. Maybe it's because I didn't have it on prompter, and I'd point to a city, and then I couldn't remember the name of the city. It was.
I think I did that. Yeah, I think I did that a few times. That was back in the old magnetic map days.
Yep.
We'd throw those things up there. Boy, those were good times. Well, you got into reporting and certainly as an anchor for so many years at Channel 13, that's a very visible position. But you really like the reporting, right? If you had your druthers, that's what you.
But the anchoring was a key to be able to get to do the stories I wanted to do. And honestly, I feel that it was almost like being at a network, only you're at a network with family. Because we were family owned at the time, we were owned by the Wolf family out of Columbus, Ohio. They had 2 stations. If you had a good idea for a story, big story, you didn't have to go very far up the food chain in order to get attention to it and usually permission. So, at a local station, and I don't think this would happen now. I got a chance to go to Bosnia during the war, Belfast, Rome twice, Calcutta, Albania, all to do stories with an Indiana connection. And it was, I hate to hear people go, yeah, I was there in the glory days, but they really were wonderful days. And we were a family. We felt like a family. So I miss that.
And I agree. I don't think that would ever happen again at a local news station to have that kind of commitment to going wherever the story is. I just don't think I think those days, unfortunately, I think are long gone.
And it's too bad because I do think it paid off. I know that helped increase the visibility for Hope to Tell, and Hope to Tell stayed on the lips of viewers for a while. They knew what it was, and they knew, and it was a destination spot along with many other things at Channel 13. When I first started as an anchor, and I do not take credit for this, but when I first started as an anchor, we were coming in 5th behind reruns of Punky Brewster in our news. And a big group of people climbed a rather large hill over a period of years, and the station just got better and better. And I can't say that, I was a part of it, but I'm certainly not the reason, because after I left, ratings continued to go up, so it wasn't about me, but it was really nice time to be there.
Yeah, probably an unfair question, but as you look at all the trips and stories you did around the globe, I've got to assume the Mother Teresa reporting kind of stands alone maybe, but is there another one or two that you really, think about and look back on as being very special?
Yes, and the other two were right here. One was getting the opportunity to look at, it was the then Wishart burn unit. It was the only level 1 burn unit at the time in our area. And I had, I sat next to the medical director of the burn unit at a gala and said, I've always wondered what really goes on. Would you ever consider letting us come behind the scenes if something really big happens? He said yes. After that, HIPAA was passed, making it more difficult. But we had a huge burn incident here, 13 painters in the back of a box truck going down 465.
Yeah.
Explosion inside the truck. They spilled onto the interstate, burning alive. We went in for a year and followed their emotional, physical, spiritual journey. And that really made an impression. And we did a half-hour documentary that became the nugget, the center of the wheel for a wider piece that was distributed to fire stations all around North America. The second one was on transplantation. Got more mail about that, Gary, than even the Mother Teresa story. We followed real time the transplantation of organs after an accident. Very unusual thing to be able to get on television, but it people have the conversation as a result of that. You have to have the conversation if you feel strongly that you want to donate your organs. You have to tell somebody in advance. It's not enough just to sign your license. So that one was another one. Those are the three stories that I think had the most profound effect.
Yeah. As you look back on your career and so many highlights, did it make it that much sweeter, that much more enjoyable to be able to do those in your hometown? I mean, to be able to work here and to really be that person here in Indianapolis, your hometown.
Yeah, what an insightful question. Absolutely, it did. Yeah, and to be able to do those stories, and we're in a place where my dad could see them, my family could see them. Yeah, it's sweet. It's just a nice thing. And I had thought about leaving Indiana, but I was so happy at Channel 13 and ended up staying there for 20 years. It was terrific.
That's another thing we have in common because it's so unusual in the broadcast business to stay in one state. I was in Fort Wayne for 2.5 years, moved down here to Channel 6 and, have stayed here. So have stayed in Indiana the entire career. So it's a bit unusual.
What did you like about it? I'm just curious, turn the tables about doing this work in your home state.
I really loved it. And now, as I transitioned and created the business show and everything I'm doing now, it has been so rewarding to me to be able to report on and to cover and to connect with people in my home state, and to be able to do it, whether it's here in Indianapolis or Fort Wayne or wherever the story may be, and to watch the ascension of Indianapolis in so many ways and how it's changed dramatically over the years. And now increasingly we're beginning to see places like Fort Wayne and a bit in Evansville and some other areas ascend upward and to kind of pick themselves up by the bootstraps and do things. So that's been especially rewarding to me.
Very much so. And I have students in both of those markets, by the way, graduates.
Good.
So it's
Very good.
Fun to see.
Yeah. So what's next, Anne? You're teaching. You just signed a new 5-year deal to continue teaching at IU. As you look to the future, what anything left to accomplish you want to do out there?
Yes. I made the mistake of saying a long time ago I wanted to write a book, and then I never have gotten around to it. So maybe in my older age, I will do that. And I'm not exactly sure what the book will be about yet, except that for a while, I got a chance to speak nationally after I had stepped down for nurses, which happened very organically. But I ended up going all around the country speaking for nurses and found that those stories of hope to tell resonate no matter where you are. So I think something along the lines of the same kind of storytelling that I've been doing. If I get the guts to write a book and it's hard work.
Yeah.
So it's hard work. So that may be in the future. At least I hope it is.
Well, you've got plenty of material for a book. Anne Ryder, you've been, it's been a real treat to catch up with you virtually here. I hope to see you again soon. Longtime anchor, reporter, Hall of Fame journalist. Anne, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on this edition of the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. It's a weekly conversation with achievers in business, sports, entertainment, and beyond. And you can download it at Apple or wherever you find your podcasts. I'm Gary Dick. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.